The streets of Riverside weren't always cracked and faded. Devin could still remember when the neighborhood bustled with family-owned shops, when the park had working swings, and when his parents didn't have to live 3 hours away just to make rent. At 16, he'd grown tall enough to see the world changing around him, but too young to stop it. Rain tapped against the window of Riverside High's library as Devin hunched over his calculus homework. Math made sense to him. It had rules, patterns, and when you solved a problem right, it stayed solved. Unlike real life, libraries closing in 5 minutes, called Mrs. Wilson from behind her desk. "Pack up, everyone." Devin glanced at his watch, 4:55 p.m. He still had his shift at Joe's corner store starting at 5:30, just enough time to check on Grandma Rose before work. He stuffed his textbooks into his backpack, the zipper struggling against the weight of advanced placement materials that might someday be his ticket out of Riverside. Outside, the late afternoon shower had turned the air heavy. Devin pulled his hood up and started his 15-minute walk home, passing by what used to be Johnson Family Hardware, his family's store for 3 generations. Now it was just another empty storefront with a faded for lease sign that nobody believed anymore. 5 years ago, when Dominic Weston's West Corp announced plans for the Riverside Renaissance, people had been excited. New jobs, new opportunities, a modern Riverside development with shopping, apartments, and offices. His parents had even attended the community meetings, thinking maybe they could expand their hardware business. Then came the reality. Construction began with demolitions. Property taxes skyrocketed. The small business loans to help transition local shops came with impossible terms. One by one, Riverside's family businesses collapsed. The bakery where Devin had gotten birthday cakes every year, the barber shop where he'd gotten his first haircut, and eventually, Johnson Family Hardware. His father held on longer than most, working 18-hour days, letting go of their 2 employees, even selling their car. But math didn't lie. The numbers stopped adding up. 6 months after the Renaissance broke ground, his parents sat Devin down at their kitchen table. "We found jobs," his mother had said, her eyes red but voice steady. "But they're in Capital City. Both of you?" Devin had asked, already knowing the answer. "You'll stay with Grandma Rose," his father explained. "The schools are better here, and she needs someone to look after her. We'll send money every month and we'll be back every other weekend." That was the plan anyway. But over time, the visits stretched to once a month, then special occasions. Money still came regularly. His parents never failed there. But Devin and Grandma Rose formed their own small family unit in the fading neighborhood. Devin turned onto Maple Street, where the once neat row of bungalows now showed their age in peeling paint and sagging porches. He approached the blue house with white trim, still the best maintained on the block thanks to his weekend repair work. His grandmother believed in pride even when times were hard. "Grandma, I'm home," he called, stepping inside. Rose Johnson sat in her armchair by the window, a half-finished quilt spread across her lap. At 72, her hands moved slower than they used to, but they never stopped moving. "There's my college boy," she smiled, her dark eyes crinkling at the corners. "How was school today?" "Same as always," Devin said, dropping his backpack and heading to the kitchen. "You take your medicine?" "Yes, doctor," she called after him, the smile evident in her voice. Devin checked the pillbox anyway. Thursday's compartment was empty, good, and grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl. "I've got work until close tonight." "Don't wait up. Joe working you too hard again?" she asked as he came back into the living room. "Nah, I asked for the extra hours. College applications are coming up and every dollar helps." He didn't mention that the last electric bill had been higher than expected, or that he'd been setting aside money for her birthday next month. Grandma Rose patted the quilt. "This one's for you to take when you go. Every college boy needs a quilt from home. I haven't even applied yet, Grandma." "You will, and you'll get in," she said with absolute certainty. "Your grandfather and I didn't fight all our lives for you to stay stuck in Riverside." Devin leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I've got to run. There's leftover stew in the fridge for dinner." Outside again, Devin jogged toward downtown, past more empty storefronts and the massive construction site that dominated the Riverside area. The Renaissance project stood half-finished, a strange monument of partial structures and idle equipment. Word around town was that Westcorp had financial problems. The promised jobs never fully materialized, and now even the construction had slowed to a crawl. Beyond the chain-link fence surrounding the site, Devon could see the curved steel beams of what was supposed to become the centerpiece, the Weston Tower, a 20-story mixed-use building that would have been the tallest structure for 50 miles. Now it stood like a skeleton, rusting slowly in the rain. Joe's Corner Store sat at the intersection of Main and River Streets, one of the few original businesses that had survived. Joe Chen had owned the building outright for 30 years and refused all offers to sell. His stubbornness had paid off. With most other shops gone, Joe's was now the only place to buy groceries without driving to the big box store 10 miles away. "You're early," Joe said as Devon entered, shaking water from his jacket. "Thought I'd help with the delivery before my shift." Joe nodded appreciatively. At 65, his back bothered him more than he admitted, and the Thursday deliveries always came with heavy cases of soda and water. "Heard from your folks?" Joe asked as they stacked cans in the back room. "Dad called yesterday. They're good. Mom got a promotion at the hotel." "They should be running their own business, not working for others," Joe said, a familiar refrain. "Your grandfather would have never left." "Different times," Devon said quietly. "Different times," Joe agreed, then changed the subject. "You applying to State University? And City College plus 3 others if I can get the application fees together." "Smart boy." Joe straightened up, wincing slightly. "When you get your acceptance letters, you let me know. I want to be first to congratulate you." Devon nodded, not wanting to jinx anything by talking too much about college. It still felt like a distant dream, something that happened to other kids from better neighborhoods. But his GPA was solid, and his test scores put him in the top percentile nationally. If scholarships came through, if, the bell over the door jingled and Joe headed out front. "You stock the coolers, I'll handle the register." For the next few hours, Devon fell into the familiar rhythm of the store, stocking, cleaning, occasionally helping customers find items. At 9, the sky darkened completely and rain began to pound harder against the windows. "Weather app says it's going to storm all night," Joe commented, scrolling through his phone. "Might be a quiet evening," but at 9:30, the bell rang again and a man in an expensive suit rushed in, shaking water from an umbrella that had clearly failed against the strengthening wind. "Do you sell phone chargers?" he asked without preamble. "My battery's dead and I've got important calls to make." Something about his voice made Devon look up from the shelf he was organizing. The man was tall, with silver hair at his temples and the kind of tailored clothes Devon had only seen in magazines. Despite being soaked from the rain, he carried himself with authority. "Back wall electronics section," Joe pointed. "Devon can help you find the right one." The man turned and Devon felt a jolt of recognition. He'd only seen Dominic Weston in news photos and that one community meeting years ago. But there was no mistaking him. This was the man whose company had changed Riverside forever, whose decisions had split Devon's family apart. For a moment, Devon considered pretending not to hear, letting Weston wander the small store looking for chargers. But his grandmother hadn't raised him that way. "This way, sir," he said, leading Weston to the small electronics display. "What kind of phone do you have?" "Latest iPhone," Weston said, barely looking at Devon as he pulled the dead device from his pocket. "I'm only in town for the day. Didn't bring my charger." Devon handed him the correct cable. "Anything else?" Weston glanced around the store with thinly veiled disdain. "No, just this." At the register, Joe rang up the purchase. If he recognized Weston, he didn't show it. "Nasty night to be out," Joe commented as he bagged the charger. "Storm's getting worse." "I'm staying at the Grand Hotel in Capital City. Should be fine once I'm on the highway," Weston said dismissively. He handed over a credit card that gleamed metallic in the fluorescent light. Devon watched from the end of an aisle as the transaction completed. This man, who probably spent more on lunch than Devon made in a week, had no idea who he was, had no idea that his renaissance had shattered dozens of families just like Devon's. Weston tucked the small bag into his suit pocket and nodded curtly. "Thanks." And then he was gone, back into the storm, leaving only wet footprints on the linoleum floor. "You know who that was?" Devon asked Joe quietly. "I know." Joe's face hardened. "Man has some nerve showing his face in Riverside after what he did." Through the front windows, they watched as Weston climbed into a sleek black car parked at the curb. "Wonder what brought him back," Devon mused. "Nothing good," Joe replied, turning away. "Nothing good ever comes from men like that." Neither of them could have imagined how wrong and right those words would prove to be, or how the paths of the billionaire and the boy would cross again before the night was over. The storm that had threatened all evening finally unleashed its full fury by the time Devin finished his shift at Joe's corner store. Rain hammered the sidewalk in sheets, turning gutters into rushing streams. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the half-finished Riverside Renaissance project in stark, skeletal relief against the night sky. "Maybe you should wait it out," Joe suggested, looking concerned as he counted the register. "I can drive you home when it lets up." Devin shook his head, zipping his rain jacket up to his chin. "Grandma Rose will worry. Besides, I've walked home in worse." That wasn't exactly true, but he didn't want to be a burden. Joe frowned but handed Devin an extra garbage bag. "At least put this over your backpack. Keep your books dry." Outside, the wind nearly knocked Devin sideways. He tucked his head down and began the familiar walk home, choosing the route along River Road. Though slightly longer, the road followed the bend of the Millwater River and had better streetlights than the more direct path through neighborhoods, where budget cuts had left many lamps broken. Devin had gone barely half a mile when the storm intensified. Thunder boomed overhead, so close it seemed to vibrate in his chest. The rain was relentless, soaking through his jacket despite his best efforts. He quickened his pace, keeping close to the guardrail that separated the road from the steep slope down to the river. The headlights appeared suddenly behind him, bright, expensive-looking beams cutting through the downpour. Devin moved further to the side, giving the approaching vehicle plenty of room on the narrow road. As the car drew nearer, he recognized the sleek black luxury sedan that had been parked outside Joe's earlier. Weston. The car slowed as it approached, and for a bizarre moment, Devin wondered if the billionaire recognized him from the store and was going to offer a ride. But then he saw the vehicle's tires struggling for traction on the flooded asphalt. The car was hydroplaning. It happened in seconds. The sedan fishtailed, tires squealing against wet pavement. Devin froze, watching in horror as the vehicle spun, crashed through the guardrail with a terrible screech of metal, and tipped nose first down the embankment toward the swollen river. For 3 heartbeats, Devin stood paralyzed. Then instinct took over. "Hey!" he shouted uselessly into the storm, already scrambling down the muddy slope. "Hold on." The sedan had rolled once before, coming to rest partially submerged, its front end already dipping into the churning water. The river, normally lazy and shallow, had transformed into a powerful current that pulled hungrily at the vehicle. Devin slipped and slid down the embankment, heart pounding so hard he could feel each beat in his throat. The rational part of his brain screamed that this was dangerous, that he should call for help instead of risking his own life. But his phone was in his backpack, probably soaked despite Joe's garbage bag, and there was no time anyway. The car was sinking fast. Reaching the riverside, Devin waded into the knee-deep water, fighting against the current. The driver's door was partially submerged, but he could see a figure slumped against the steering wheel, unmoving. "Can you hear me?" he yelled, pulling at the door handle. It was locked. Devin looked around desperately, spotted a large rock near the shore, and splashed back to grab it. The car had sunk deeper in those few seconds. Water now reached the bottom of the windows. Using the rock, Devin smashed at the driver's side window, turning his face away from flying glass. It took 3 hard blows before the window shattered. Cold river water rushed into the car. Inside, Dominic Weston lay unconscious, a gash across his forehead slowly oozing blood. The seatbelt held him in place as water began filling the vehicle's interior. Devin reached through the broken window, fumbling with the seatbelt release. His fingers, numb from cold and adrenaline, slipped twice before the belt finally retracted. Weston slumped sideways and Devin grabbed him under the arms, pulling the older man toward the window. "Come on." Devin grunted through clenched teeth, straining against the dead weight. "Come on." The water level rose rapidly as the car settled deeper into the riverbed. Devin braced his feet against the sinking vehicle and pulled with everything he had. Slowly, painfully, he dragged Weston's upper body through the window. With one final heave, he freed the billionaire completely, both of them tumbling backward into the rushing water. The current immediately caught them, sweeping them downstream. Devin kept one arm locked around Weston's chest, using his other arm to fight toward the shore. His feet occasionally found purchase on the riverbed, only to be swept away again. His muscles screamed with the effort of keeping both their heads above water. After what felt like hours but was probably less than a minute, Devin's foot hit something solid, a fallen tree, its branches extending into the river. He grabbed it, holding tight as the current tried to tear them away. Inch by excruciating inch, Devin dragged himself and Weston toward the shore, using the tree's branches as handholds. When they finally reached the muddy bank, he collapsed, rolling the unconscious man onto his back away from the water's edge. "Hey, wake up!" Devin shouted, tapping Weston's face. The man's skin was cold and pale, his breathing shallow. "Mr. Weston, can you hear me?" There was no response. Devin tilted Weston's head back, checking that his airway was clear. The man was breathing but remained unconscious. The gash on his forehead had mostly stopped bleeding, but a large bruise was forming around it. Devin glanced up at the road above them. They'd been carried at least 50 yards downstream from the crash site. The embankment here was even steeper, slick with mud and nearly impossible to climb while carrying an unconscious man. "Help!" Devin shouted toward the road, his voice thin against the storm's fury. "Somebody help." But River Road was deserted at this hour, especially in such weather. Devin fumbled in his sodden jacket pockets for his phone, already knowing it was useless. Then he remembered Weston's phone. The man had just bought a charger from Joe's. Searching the billionaire's pockets, Devin found the phone. Dead, as expected. But in the inside pocket of Weston's expensive suit jacket, protected by the waterproof material, he found a small leather case. Inside was a business card with the West Corp logo and an emergency contact number. Devin looked around desperately. The nearest house was a quarter-mile away. He couldn't leave Weston alone. The man might stop breathing or the rising river might reach them. But they couldn't stay here either. A distant pair of headlights appeared on the road above. Devin waved his arms wildly, shouting until his voice cracked. The car slowed, then stopped. A moment later, a flashlight beam cut through the darkness. "Down here," Devin called. "We need help." Two figures appeared at the top of the embankment. A middle-aged couple in rain gear peering down in shock at the scene below. "There was an accident," Devin explained. "He's hurt. Call 911. What followed was a blur of activity. The woman called emergency services while her husband helped Devin create a makeshift stretcher from his raincoat. Together they managed to drag Weston up the slippery slope to the road, where they covered him with emergency blankets from the couple's car. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics worked quickly, checking Weston's vitals and loading him onto a proper stretcher. One of them turned to Devin, who stood shivering beside the couple's car. "You pulled him out of the river?" the paramedic asked, looking impressed. Devin nodded, suddenly exhausted now that the adrenaline was fading. His car went off the road. "You're coming to the hospital too," the paramedic decided, eyeing Devin's soaked clothes and bleeding hands. "Cut," he realized now from the broken glass and the struggle in the river. "You need to be checked for hypothermia." In the ambulance, as a different paramedic wrapped a thermal blanket around his shoulders and checked his temperature, Devin finally got a good look at the man he'd rescued. Without the water and mud obscuring his features, there was no mistaking Dominic Weston, the same face that had appeared in the newspaper 5 years ago, announcing the Riverside Renaissance that had destroyed so many lives, including Devin's. The paramedic mistook Devin's stunned expression. "Don't worry, kid. He's stable. Head injury, possible concussion, but his vitals are good. You saved his life." Devin said nothing, his mind reeling. He had just risked everything to save the very man who had torn his family apart. Would Weston have done the same for him? The question burned in his throat like bile. At Riverside General Hospital, one of the few buildings that had benefited from Westcorp's investment, Devin was separated from Weston. Doctors checked him over, treated the cuts on his hands, and pronounced him free of hypothermia or other serious injuries. A nurse brought him dry scrubs to replace his wet clothes. "Lucky kid," the doctor commented, signing his discharge papers. "Not many people would have jumped into that river tonight." "Can I go home now?" Devin asked. All he wanted was to get back to Grandma Rose, who must be worried sick by now. The hospital had called her, but Devin knew she wouldn't rest until he walked through the door. "In a minute," the doctor replied. "There's someone who wants to talk to you first." A police officer entered, notebook in hand, asking for details about the accident. Devin explained everything, from seeing the car hydroplane to pulling Weston from the river. He left out the part about recognizing the billionaire, about the history between them. It didn't seem relevant. As the officer was finishing, a hospital administrator appeared in the doorway looking oddly nervous. "Devin Johnson?" she asked. "Mr. Weston is awake. He's asking for you." Devin hesitated outside the hospital room door. His hands, bandaged where the broken car window had cut them, trembled slightly. The hospital administrator who had brought him here waited expectantly. "He's really asking for me," Devin confirmed, stalling for time. "Why?" The woman adjusted her glasses. Mr. Weston was quite insistent about thanking the young man who saved his life. She lowered her voice to an impressed whisper. "Do you know who he is? Dominic Weston practically owns half this town." More than half, Devin thought bitterly, but he just nodded. "Just a few minutes," the administrator added. "He needs rest, doctor's orders." Taking a deep breath, Devin pushed open the door. The private room was spacious by hospital standards, with soft lighting and a window overlooking what would be a garden view come morning. In the adjustable bed lay Dominic Weston, looking smaller somehow than he had in the store earlier that evening. A bandage wrapped around his head and an IV line ran into his arm. His expensive suit had been replaced by a hospital gown. Weston's eyes, alert despite the late hour and his injuries, fixed immediately on Devin. For a long moment, neither spoke. "They tell me you pulled me from my car," Weston finally said, his voice raspy but strong. "That the river would have taken me if you hadn't jumped in." Devin shrugged uncomfortably. "Anyone would have done it." "No." Weston shook his head slightly, wincing at the movement. "No, they wouldn't have. The doctor said the water temperature was barely above freezing. You risked your life." He studied Devin with newfound intensity. "What's your name, son?" The word son sent an uncomfortable jolt through Devin. His own father hadn't called him that in person for months, forced to use the word through phone calls instead. "Devin Johnson," he answered flatly. Something flickered in Weston's eyes. Confusion, then the slow dawning of recognition. "Johnson? From the hardware store on Main?" Devin's chest tightened. So he did remember. "Yes, sir. Johnson Family Hardware. Been in Riverside for 3 generations." He couldn't keep the edge from his voice as he added, "Until 5 years ago." Weston's gaze dropped to his hands, resting on the crisp hospital blanket. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the soft beeping of medical equipment. "I remember the community meetings," Weston said finally. "Your father spoke at several of them." "Tall man beard?" "That's him. He was concerned about the development plans." Devin nearly laughed at the understatement. He was right to be concerned. "The store is gone now. My parents had to move away for work. Lots of families did." Weston looked genuinely surprised. "Move away? But the Renaissance project was supposed to create jobs, bring opportunity." "For who?" Devin asked, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself. This man was still recovering from a serious accident, regardless of what he'd done to Riverside. The construction jobs went to outside contractors. The small business loans had impossible terms. The property taxes doubled overnight. "I didn't know," Weston said quietly. "Those details were handled by my development team. I was told the community was on board." Devin crossed his arms. "Maybe you should have checked." The heart monitor beside Weston's bed beeped a little faster. The older man shifted, trying to sit up straighter. "You have every right to be angry. But I need to ask, if you knew who I was, why did you help me tonight?" The question caught Devin off guard. He hadn't fully processed it himself, that moment of recognition on the riverside. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just saw someone who needed help." Weston nodded slowly, as if confirming something to himself. "Where do your parents live now?" "Capital City. My dad works maintenance at an office building. Mom's at the Grand Hotel." Devin hesitated, then added, "I live with my grandmother. She couldn't leave. This house has been in her family since the 1950s. And you?" "School? Riverside High, senior year. College plans?" The personal questions were starting to make Devin uncomfortable. "Look, Mr. Weston, I'm glad you're okay, but it's late and my grandma is waiting up worried." "Of course." Weston nodded, then winced again at the movement. "I apologize. It's just..." He paused, seeming to search for words. "I've been coming to Riverside for project meetings for 5 years, and this is the most honest conversation I've had about what's actually happened here." A soft knock interrupted them as a nurse entered. "Sorry, but Mr. Weston needs his rest now." Devin nodded, relieved at the excuse to leave. This conversation was becoming too strange, too personal. I should go. Wait, Weston called as Devon reached the door. Will you come back tomorrow? There's something I'd like to discuss with you. Devon hesitated. I have school and work after, please. It's important. Something in the man's voice, a note of genuine urgency, made Devon nod reluctantly. I'll try to come by after my shift, around 9. Outside in the hall, Devon found a hospital volunteer waiting to drive him home. The clock in the lobby read 1:26 a.m. Thursday had become Friday, and in a few hours he'd need to be back at school, pretending this surreal night had never happened. By morning, the story had already spread through Riverside like wildfire. The volunteer driver must have talked, or perhaps one of the paramedics. Small towns had no secrets, especially when those secrets involved the most controversial figure in recent local history. Devon felt eyes on him the moment he entered Riverside High. Whispers followed him down the hallway. That's him, pulled Weston from the river. King Dew could have just let him drown. After what that man did to his family and his best friend Tyler fell into step beside him. Dude, is it true? You saved Dominic Weston's life? Devon sighed, opening his locker. News travels fast. Are you kidding? It's all over town. Mrs. Chen from the grocery store called my mom at 6 a.m. to tell her. Tyler lowered his voice. Some people are saying you should have let him drown. That's messed up. Devon slammed his locker shut. I'm not going to let someone die because of business decisions, no matter how bad they were. Whoa, I'm not saying I think that. Tyler held up his hands. Just telling you what people are saying. All day, Devon found himself at the center of unwanted attention. Teachers gave him approving nods. Some students treated him like a hero, while others looked at him like he'd betrayed the town. By lunch period, he escaped to the library where Mrs. Wilson's strict no-talking policy gave him a brief respite. His phone buzzed with a text from Grandma Rose. Town is talking. You did the right thing. Proud of you. At least someone understood. After school, Joe was waiting for him outside the store, newspaper in hand. The Riverside Weekly's front page showed an old photo of Weston cutting a ribbon at some corporate event. The headline read, Billionaire developer saved by local teen in night rescue. You're famous, Joe said, his expression unreadable. Devon shook his head. I don't want to be. Inside, Joe flipped the closed sign to open and turned to face Devon properly. You know, when I heard who it was you pulled from that river, I wondered if you knew at the time. I did, Devon admitted. Recognized him when I got to the car. Joe nodded, a hint of a smile crossing his weathered face. Your grandfather would be proud. He always said character is what you do when no one's watching. He paused, though in this case, seems the whole town is watching now. The afternoon shift passed in a blur of curious customers who came in for milk or cigarettes, but really wanted to hear about the rescue. Devon kept his answers short, focusing on stocking shelves and inventory counts instead. By closing time, his patience had worn thin. Joe, is it okay if I leave a little early tonight? Weston asked me to come by the hospital. Joe's eyebrows shot up. What for? No idea. Said he wanted to talk about something important. Be careful, Joe warned. Men like that always have an angle. The walk to Riverside General took 15 minutes. The storm had cleared, leaving behind puddles and debris, including yellow caution tape around the broken guardrail where Weston's car had gone off the road. Someone had already placed flowers there, as if it were a memorial instead of just the scene of an accident. At the hospital, Devon was surprised to find 2 suited men standing outside Weston's room. They eyed him suspiciously until a nurse vouched for him. Mr. Johnson, one of them said, opening the door. Mr. Weston is expecting you. Inside, Weston was sitting up in bed looking remarkably better than the night before. The IV was gone, though the head bandage remained. A laptop sat open on a rolling table beside him. Devon, he smiled, gesturing to a chair. Thank you for coming. Devon sat cautiously, noticing a folder on the bedside table with his name on it. What's this about, Mr. Weston? The billionaire closed his laptop. I've spent the day learning about Riverside. The real Riverside, not the sanitized reports I've been getting. His eyes were clearer now, intense with purpose. I've also learned about you, Devon Johnson. Honor roll student, advanced placement classes. Part-time job to help support your grandmother. How did you? I made some calls. Weston waved dismissively. The point is I owe you my life. And I owe this town far more than I realized. He reached for the folder with Devin's name and held it out. "I'd like to make amends, starting with you." Devin stared at the folder in Weston's outstretched hand, not reaching for it. "What's this supposed to be?" he asked, suspicion evident in his voice. "Open it," Weston urged. Cautiously, Devin took the folder and flipped it open. Inside was a document on Westcorp letterhead, a scholarship offer. Full tuition, room and board at any university that accepted him, plus a monthly stipend for 4 years. "I don't understand," Devin said, looking up from the paper. "It's simple," Weston replied. "You're a bright young man who saved my life. I want to ensure you have every opportunity to succeed." The amount listed made Devin's head swim. More money than his parents made in 2 years. More than enough to attend any college in the country without a single loan. "Why?" Devin asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Weston shifted in his bed, wincing slightly at the movement. "When I was your age, someone gave me a chance. A scholarship that changed everything for me." He gestured to the folder. "I'm just paying it forward." Devin closed the folder and set it on the bed. "Thank you, but no." Weston blinked in surprise. "No, did you see the amount?" "This is a full ride." "I know what it is," Devin interrupted. "But this isn't just about me. What about the other kids in Riverside? What about all the families that had to leave because of your project? What about my parents who still can't come home?" For a long moment, Weston said nothing. The beeping of hospital monitors filled the silence. Finally, he nodded slowly. "You're right," he said, surprising Devin. "A scholarship for one student doesn't fix what happened here." He reached for his laptop, turning the screen toward Devin. "That's why I've been working on something bigger all day." On the screen was a detailed document titled Riverside Renaissance Community Restoration Initiative. Weston scrolled through pages of plans, budgets, and timelines. "I've been on the phone with my board since 6 this morning," Weston explained. "We're completely overhauling the Riverside project. New focus, new priorities." He pointed to a section of the document. "Local hiring requirements, affordable housing units, small business incubator with genuine support, not predatory loans." Devin scanned the document skeptically. "This looks good on paper, but you've heard promises before," Weston finished. "I understand your doubt. That's why I need someone who knows this community to help ensure we get it right this time." He fixed Devin with an earnest look. "Someone like you? Me? I'm 17. I'm not a business consultant." "No, but you're honest. And you care about this town." Weston closed the laptop. "I'm offering you a paid internship with the project team. Part-time now, full-time in the summer. Your insights would be invaluable." Devin stood up, pacing the small room. This was too much, too fast. Yesterday, Dominic Weston was just the distant villain in Riverside's decline. Today, he was offering scholarships and internships and community restoration projects. "Why should I trust this?" Devin asked finally. "Why should anyone in town trust you now?" Weston was quiet for a moment. "Near-death experiences have a way of clarifying things," he said softly. "When you pulled me from that river, I had a moment before I blacked out completely where I thought, this is how it ends. Alone in a town that hates me for good reason." He looked up at Devin. "I've built my career on seeing opportunities others miss. But somehow I missed what was happening right in front of me in Riverside. I can't undo the past 5 years, but I can change what happens next." The sincerity in the man's voice was hard to dismiss. Still, Devin hesitated. "Think about it," Weston said, reaching for his business card on the bedside table. He wrote a personal cell number on the back. "Call me when you decide. The scholarship offer stands regardless." Devin took the card, tucked it into his pocket along with the folder, and left without another word. "He offered you what?" Grandma Rose's eyes widened as Devin explained his hospital visit. They sat at their small kitchen table where he'd laid out the scholarship papers. "Full ride. Any school I get into?" "Lord have mercy," she whispered, scanning the document. "And an internship too? Working directly with him?" Devin nodded, picking at his dinner without much appetite. "Says he wants to make things right in Riverside." "People can change," Grandma Rose said thoughtfully. "Especially when the good Lord gives them a wake-up call like nearly drowning. Or he feels guilty and this makes him feel better," Devin countered. "Once the guilt passes, what then?" His grandmother reached across the table to take his hand. "What does your heart tell you?" Devin sighed. "I don't know. Part of me thinks this could be real, that maybe some good can come from all this. Another part says it's too good to be true." Sleep on it, she advised. Talk to your parents. See what they think. That night, Devin called his parents and explained everything. His father was immediately suspicious. Sounds like a PR move to me, he said. Man nearly drowns, gets saved by a kid from the community he ruined. Of course he's making grand gestures. The scholarship is real, though, Devin's mother pointed out. That would change everything for your future, baby. I know, Devin said. But what about you guys? What about coming home? There was a pause on the other end of the line. We've built a life here now, his father said gently. It's not what we wanted, but it's what we have. Just think about yourself for once, his mother added. This is your chance. After hanging up, Devin lay awake for hours, turning the decision over in his mind. When he finally drifted off, his dreams were filled with rushing water and sinking cars. The next morning, Saturday, Devin walked to Joe's store, the scholarship folder tucked under his arm. He needed to talk this through with someone who would be completely honest. Joe was sweeping the sidewalk out front when Devin arrived. There he is, Riverside's hero, he called. Please don't, Devin groaned. I've had enough of that. Inside, over coffee in the small back office, Devin explained Weston's offers and his dilemma. Joe whistled low when he saw the scholarship amount. That's life-changing money. But is it right to take it? After everything he did? Joe considered this, taking a long sip of his coffee. Let me ask you something. If Weston really is trying to change, trying to make amends, wouldn't you want to be part of that? To help make sure he does it right this time? Devin hadn't thought of it that way. Maybe. And if he's not sincere, if this is all for show, Joe shrugged. Then at least you get your college paid for. Either way, you win. By the time Devin left the store, his mind was made up. He pulled Weston's card from his pocket and dialed the number. 3 weeks later, Riverside was buzzing with activity. Construction equipment returned to the half-finished development site. But this time with a difference. Local workers made up half the crew, including several who had lost businesses during the first phase. The former site of Johnson Family Hardware now housed the Riverside Small Business Center, where local entrepreneurs could access genuine support, reasonable loans, and affordable retail space. A community board, including Devin's grandmother, had oversight of the development plans. Word spread quickly when Weston's company posted job openings for the revitalized project, management positions with competitive salaries and benefits packages. Among the first hired were 2 former Riverside business owners who had been forced to relocate to Capital City. Devin's parents, Dominic Weston, still recovering from his injuries but determined to be hands-on with the new direction, held a town hall meeting at Riverside High's auditorium. The crowd was skeptical, even hostile at first. But as he outlined the concrete changes already underway and introduced his new community advisory team, including Devin, the mood gradually shifted. I can't undo the mistakes of the past, Weston told the packed room, but with your input and partnership, we can build a future that works for everyone in Riverside. After the meeting, Devin found himself surrounded by classmates and neighbors, some congratulating him on his new role, others asking if Weston was for real. I think he is, Devin answered honestly. But even if I'm wrong, I'm going to make sure Riverside gets what it deserves this time. As the crowd dispersed, Tyler nudged his arm. Still can't believe you're working for Weston now. How's that feel? Devin watched as Weston chatted with Joe and several other longtime business owners across the room, listening more than talking. Weird, Devin admitted, but also like maybe something good can come from something bad, you know? Your parents really moving back? Devin nodded, a smile spreading across his face. This weekend. Mom already gave notice at the hotel. Later, walking home under a clear spring sky, Devin passed the riverside where he had pulled Weston from the water. The current flowed peaceful and steady now, giving no hint of that stormy night's danger. On the bank, construction crews had already begun work on what would become Riverside Park, public green space with river access for everyone, built on land that had originally been slated for luxury condos. Devin stopped to watch the sunset reflect off the water. Just weeks ago, his biggest worry had been scraping together college application fees. Now his future was secure, his family was reuniting, and his hometown had a second chance, all because he'd chosen to help someone who, by all rights, he could have left behind. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Just packed the last box. 2 days and we're home. Home. After 5 long years, his family would be whole again. Devin smiled and continued walking, the weight that had pressed on his shoulders for so long finally beginning to lift. 6 months could change everything. Devin knew this better than anyone as he stood on the stage in Riverside High's auditorium, the valedictorian medal hanging around his neck catching the light as he addressed his graduating class. "When I started senior year," he said into the microphone, his voice steady despite the crowd, "I thought I knew exactly how my story would go. Work hard, save every penny, hope for enough scholarship money to get out of Riverside and never look back." The audience was silent, parents and families leaning forward in their seats. In the front row, Grandma Rose beamed with pride. Beside her sat Devin's parents, back home for good now, their faces shining with tears. "But sometimes," Devin continued, "life takes a turn you never expect. Sometimes a storm comes through and washes away the path you thought you were on." His eyes found Dominic Weston, sitting respectfully toward the back of the auditorium. The businessman nodded slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement between them. "What I've learned this year is that it's not about the storm. It's about what you build after it passes." Looking out at the familiar faces, classmates he'd grown up with, teachers who had pushed him, neighbors who had watched this town struggle and now begin to thrive again, Devin felt a swell of emotion. Riverside isn't just where we're from. It's who we are. And who we are is a community that doesn't break, even when bent. A community that remembers its past but isn't trapped by it. A community that knows how to rebuild together. As he finished his speech to thunderous applause, Devin caught Tyler's eye in the line of graduates. His friend gave him a thumbs up, mouthing, "Nailed it." Later, as families mingled at the reception in the decorated gymnasium, Devin made his way through waves of congratulations and well wishes. The mood was celebratory, but there was something more in the air, a sense of genuine optimism that had been missing from Riverside for years. "There's our valedictorian," Joe called, pulling Devin into a quick hug. "Speech had me tearing up, and I don't tear up for nothing." "Thanks for coming, Joe," Devin smiled. "Means a lot. Wouldn't have missed it." Joe lowered his voice. "Store's doing better than ever, by the way. That new business center's brought in foot traffic like the old days." Across the gym, Devin's parents were deep in conversation with other returning families. His mother caught his eye and waved him over. "Mrs. Wilson was just telling us how you helped tutor kids after school this semester," she said proudly as he joined them. The librarian nodded. "Best assistant I ever had. Those children look up to him." His father squeezed his shoulder. "Just like his grandfather, always making time for others." The simple pride in his father's voice meant more to Devin than any medal or honor. Having his parents back in Riverside, watching them rebuild their lives here, that was the real achievement. As the crowd began to thin, Devin noticed Weston standing near the exit, talking with the school principal. Over the months since the accident, the businessman had become a familiar sight around town, not just for photo opportunities or ribbon cuttings, but in working meetings with local businesses, community forums, even volunteering at the new youth center that had opened last month. Excusing himself from his family, Devin made his way over. "Congratulations, Mr. Valedictorian," Weston said, extending his hand. The formality had never quite disappeared between them, but there was genuine warmth now. That was quite a speech. "Thank you for coming," Devin replied, shaking the offered hand. "And for everything else." Weston dismissed the thanks with a wave. "I should be the one thanking you, not just for the river, but for what came after. Your input on the community advisory board has been invaluable." They stepped outside into the early summer evening. The sun was just beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the town. From the school's hilltop position, they could see much of Riverside spread out below them, including the Riverside development that had once been so contentious. "Look at that," Weston said, nodding toward the view. "Night and day from where we started." He wasn't wrong. The development, once a half-abandoned collection of steel frames and construction equipment, now housed the thriving community center, small business incubator, and affordable housing units. The park along the river was complete, with families already enjoying the walking paths and playground. Most importantly, the storefronts along Main Street were filling up again with a mix of returning businesses and new ventures. "The housing units are fully occupied," Weston continued, "and the business center has a waiting list now." I heard my dad's thinking of reopening the hardware store, Devin said. With a modern twist. Workshops, classes, that kind of thing. He mentioned that at the last board meeting. We'd be lucky to have him back in business. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the town that had brought them together in such an unlikely way. So, Weston said finally, State University in the fall. Are you ready? Devin nodded. The scholarship folder he'd initially rejected had eventually been accepted, though on his terms, expanded into a program that would send 5 Riverside students to college each year. Not just him. As ready as I'll ever be. But I'll be back on breaks to keep an eye on things here. He glanced at Weston. Make sure you're sticking to the plan. The older man laughed. I wouldn't expect anything less. Grandma Rose appeared in the doorway, waving to get Devin's attention. There you are. Your parents are ready for pictures, then dinner at home. Be right there, Devin called back. Don't keep them waiting on my account, Weston said. This is your day. As Devin turned to go, Weston added, I meant to tell you. The board approved the renovation of the old community pool. It'll be named after your grandfather, the Henry Johnson Memorial Pool. Devin stopped, a lump forming in his throat. His grandfather had taught swimming lessons at that pool for decades before it closed due to budget cuts. He would have liked that, Devin managed. It was your grandmother's idea. Said he believed every child in Riverside should know how to swim. Weston smiled. Smart man. With a nod of thanks, Devin rejoined his family. As they walked to their car, his father's new car, bought with his Westcorp salary, he looked back at the school one last time. It felt like both an ending and a beginning. The changes in Riverside continued through the summer and beyond. By the time Devin returned for Thanksgiving break from his first semester at State, the transformation was remarkable. The town held its first fall festival in years, with Main Street closed to traffic and local vendors lining the sidewalks. Johnson Family Hardware had reopened, with Devin's father offering weekend workshops that drew people from neighboring towns. His mother had been promoted to Community Outreach Director for Westcorp's Riverside office, working directly with local organizations. Even more surprising were the subtle changes in how people interacted. The divide between the old Riverside and the new development had begun to blur. Families who lived in the new housing units shopped at Joe's Corner Store. Kids from different neighborhoods played together at the new park. The youth center hosted events that brought the entire community together. On a crisp November morning, Devin stood with Weston at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Henry Johnson Memorial Pool. The crowd included people from all parts of town, longtime residents who remembered swimming there as children, newcomers excited for the addition to their community, and every shade of life in between. I never thought I'd see the day, Grandma Rose whispered, clutching Devin's arm as the ribbon was cut. Your grandfather would be so proud. Of this, of you, of everything. As Weston stepped up to the microphone to say a few words, a hush fell over the crowd. Though many had been skeptical at first, his actions over the past months had slowly earned their trust. Not through grand gestures or speeches, but through keeping promises, listening to concerns, and proving through consistent effort that his change of heart was genuine. This pool represents more than just a place to swim, Weston said. It represents what we can accomplish when we truly work together, when we listen to each other, when we remember that the purpose of development isn't just profit but community. He gestured to Devin, standing with his family. Sometimes it takes a brave act to make us see what truly matters. 6 months ago, a young man from this town jumped into freezing water to save the life of someone many here considered an enemy. That act of courage changed not just my life, but the course of this community. Later, as people toured the new facility, Tyler nudged Devin's arm. Who'd have thought? The boy from the wrong side of the tracks and the billionaire, working together like this. Devin watched as his parents chatted easily with Weston, planning the next phase of community projects. Sometimes the wrong side of the tracks is just a line someone made up, he replied. The local newspaper photographer captured a moment that would become symbolic of Riverside's renaissance. Devin and Weston shaking hands in front of the pool. Grandma Rose between them with her arms linked through theirs. 3 generations of Riverside's past, present, and future united in a single frame. The headline would read, "A town transformed, how one act of courage created a bridge across every divide."